Hey Tube, welcome back. Today we will mention what are resources in a REST architecture. So in REST, which stands for Representational State Transfer architecture, a resource or resources are fundamental concepts and represent any information that can be named and manipulated. So let's take deep and take a deeper look at what resources entail in a REST architecture. The first we want to talk about, let's just, let's talk about the definition of a resource. A resource is an entity or an object of importance that the application needs to handle. This can be simple as a document or a row in a database, or as complex as an entire collection of other resources in the context of web services. The resource is typically a piece of information such as a user, a photo, a page of text, or any other item that can be addressed via a unique URI, which is short for stands for a uniform resource identifier. Number two that I want to talk about, which is oh the identification via URIs. Each resource in a REST system is uniquely identified by a URI. This URI is a standard way of locating resources, making them easily accessible and maintainable via the network. For example, in an online bookstore, we have book authors and orders might be considered resources. So let's just think about how the resources will be. So, for example, let's say that we want to get a book with a specific ID. Let's just have this. Let's create another text to talk about that. For example, if we want to take books, like a book with specific ID, we'll access it in that way. We have orders. We want to get orders. We want to get like orders number with the ID of 9,000, for example, 9,012. Let's say that there's an order with the ID. Let's imagine that. Or we want to get an author, for example. I'll just make stretch this. So this is how it's named and how identification via the URIs works. Number three, the state and representations. Although a resource represents a specific entity, the actual data returned by the server, known as a representation, might vary. Okay, a resource can have different representations based on the request format, like JSON, XML, HTML, etc. This state of a resource and at any given moment is captured in these representations. When a client makes a request to a server, it receives the current state of the resource in one of these formats. Number four, when I talk about which is the manipulating through standard methods. Resources are manipulated using standard HTTP methods. For instance, we have REST. For instance, REST uses GET to receive resource. We have POST to create a new resource, PUT to update an existing resource, and delete to remove resource. These operations correspond to read, create, update, and delete in the CRUD functions in persistent storage mechanism. Number five, which we want to talk about as well, self-descriptive message. Interaction with resource is performed through HTTP protocols, where the messages, which are the requests and response, are self-descriptive. This means each message contains enough information to describe how to process the message, which aids in the interaction with the resource. Lastly, linkability. Resources should be linkable, meaning that the access and relationships between resources can be expressed and navigated using links. This facilitates the discovery and linkage of resources on the web. So this is mainly how it works. Or this is mainly the some characteristics about resource. So resource in REST are designed to be generic, accessible, and manipulatable, making a REST a flexible and powerful architectural style for creating. So if your interviewer asks you about giving talk about resource and what are resource, you I guess expect you will talk mostly about all the point that I said, but we could say if we want to make things short, or your interviewer will only want you to answer the question in 3 or 4 lines, you said um, first we have the resources. Basically, we have like a 2 line answer, which will be resources are identified by logical URLs, as we said in the point two. It is the key element of a REST full design. Unlike SOAP web services, is in REST, you view the product data as a resource, and this resource should contain all required information. So if we want to talk about that, so resource are the fundamental concept and represent any information that can be named and manipulated. This is the answer that you will give your interviewer as a beginning, and after that you will have to talk about the like one of these points. But your interviewer will ask you about one of these points, like definition resource, the identification VRLs, etc. So yeah, that's it for today's video, and I hope you like my content.